Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at another short Latin story. This one's called The Gauls Invade Rome. So again, this is a story from H.J. Hardy's Latin reader on the for the lower forms in schools, rather. And again, lower forms is kind of a tricky one. I think this is best suited for that sort of intermediate Latin 2, 3 range. At least that's how I use it in my classroom. If you're a teacher, feel free to take a look and deploy it however you want. If you're a student just trying to learn Latin, the reason I like these stories is they give you a mix of history, like this story is, a little bit of myth, which also this story kind of is, and some of the stories have like morals in them, right? They're just fun things to read. They go beyond a traditional textbook. Sometimes those textbooks can get a little stale when you're repeating the same things over and over again. So this is a fun way to mix it up, learn something new, and just try your Latin skills on something different. So before we dive into it, what I've been doing in this series is giving you the full story in Latin, just reading it to you, so you have a chance to at least hear it. Again, my pronunciation is nothing spectacular, but at least it gives you a chance to hear someone else reading the story to you, right? Then I pause the video. So when I pause it, what I'm going to encourage you to do is go and read it on your own and come back once you feel like you have it under control. So how you do that is kind of up to you, but here's what I would recommend. Always pre-read the story. Try to make a vocab list. Look up any words you don't know. It's just really hard to understand and read if you don't know what the words mean. That's kind of a starting point. Then you want to find a classmate if you're a student or anyone you can work with. If you can read this story out loud, that's a great way to work on your speaking, your pronunciation. And if someone can read it back to you, that's a great way to work on your listening skills, right? Beyond what I can do for you here. So you always want to bring the language to life. You never want to shut off your sort of speaking, listening, understanding. If you're just reading this in your head and translating, it's not the greatest way I would say to learn it. So always do that. And then try the read and reread method, right? So read through it once, write down any problem areas you have. Maybe it's the vocab you just didn't catch. You got a few words you still don't understand. Write them down. Any grammar you're not sure of, write it down. And then go look it up, right? Try to see if you can figure out what's going on. Come back to the story, read it a second, a third, a fourth time, as many as you need. And at some point, you should be able to read through the story and understand it. And again, understanding and reading does not mean a perfect translation, right? You might miss a word here or there, but get the general idea of what's going on in most of the story without needing any vocab or grammar help, right? You can always kind of clean up the details on your own. But once you hit that point, that's a really good sign that you understand what's going on, and you can feel free to move on, okay? And when you're there, then watch the second half of this video, and if your translation is pretty close to mine, not that it has to be perfect, but if it's on the right track, you can feel like you're doing a pretty good job and you probably understood it, okay? So let's dive in. I'll start by reading the story to you now, then I'll pause it and we'll kind of go from there. So the story goes like this. You have Galli senones ad urbem venerant, et victos Romanos undecimo miliario a Roma apud flumen alium secuti, etiam urbem occuparant. Neque defendi quidquam nisi Capitolium potuit. Quod cum Dio obsedissent et iam Romani fame laborarent, a Camillo qui in vicina civitate exulabat, gravissimeque victi sunt. Postea tamen, accepto etiam auro ne Capitolium obsiderent, recaserunt, sed secutus eos Camillus ita cecidit, ut et aurum, quod his datum fuerat, et omnia quae ceperant militaria signa revocare. Okay, so we'll pause the video right there. Again, if you haven't done it on your own, go do it and then come back. But if you feel like you're in a good place and you've read through it, let's take a look, okay? So the story starts with this. You have the Galli Senones. So it's talking about the Gauls, specifically the Senones, right? So it sort of means like the Senones Gauls, right? It's just a tribe of Gauls. Remember, when you're reading Latin, Gauls is kind of a very broad and big term for basically people living in northern Italy, modern France, kind of bordering that Germany region, even into, I believe, northern Spain kind of counts as Gauls. It's a pretty all-encompassing word. So what you're really looking at is the Senones, right? That's the tribe. So the Senones came to the city, meaning to Rome. And having followed, right, Secuti, having followed the defeated Romans for 11 miles, undecimo miliario, so 11 miles from Rome at the Flumen Alium, at the Alia River. This is talking about the famous Battle of the Alia, which again is about 11 miles from Rome, and it's talking about how they followed them right after they defeated them, and they even occupied the city, occuparant urbem, right? So they came and they occupied the city. This is the famous sack of Rome, right, in 390 BCE. Okay. And then it says, and nothing was able, so potuit, right? So nothing, literally it's not anything was able, but you could just say nothing was able, defendi, to be defended, except the Capitolium, except the Capitoline Hill. So this is where the Romans have been pushed back to, right? And this is where I believe you get the famous story of Juno and the geese, right? If you want to look that up, kind of a fun story. Okay, so the Romans are basically on the Capitoline Hill. Then you have when they had besieged it, obsedissent, right? When they besieged it for a long time, and again, you have the pluperfect there, obsedissent, right? Subjunctive. So when they besieged it for a long time, and now the Romans, they laborarent fame. It literally means something like they were working from famine, from hunger. But the working part, it's probably better to say like they were suffering from famine, something like that, right? So they're starting to be starved to death, right? Then you have it's talking about the Gauls. They victi sunt gravissime, so they were severely or gravely defeated by Camillus, right? Camillo, who exulabat, who was in exile. It's kind of one way to translate, or had been in exile in a neighboring city, Vicina Civitate, right, in a neighboring state. So this is talking about the famous Camillus. He's gone, right? I believe he'd been kicked out. He's a dictator, I think, but he's been exiled, and he comes back to save the day, right? That's the story. He comes back to attack the Gauls. Then you have posteatamen, so afterward, however, then you have with the gold having been accepted. So even though gold had been accepted, right? So the Romans offered gold to the Gauls to leave them alone. And the reason they did it, you have the negative purpose clause here. You have ne capitulio obsiderant, so that they might not besiege the Capitoline Hill, right? They kind of buy them off. Recaserent, they departed, right? They left, so the Gauls leave. But Camillus, having followed them, right? Secutus eos, so having followed them, he cut them down, right? Kikidit, right? It means, one way to translate is he kind of slaughtered them or killed them, right? He cut them down. So that the gold, or both the gold, you have et aurum et omnia militaria signa, right? It's kind of spaced out. But you're saying so that the gold, which datum fuerat his, had been given to them, right? Meaning the gold they just bought off the Gauls with. The gold which had been given to them, and all the militaria signa, the military standards, just talking about like, think of like the eagle basically, but the flags, the symbols, that the army would carry, right? So all the military standards, which Caperant, which they had taken, revocaret, he took back, right? So this is the famous story of Camillus. He goes off, he fights the Gauls, and he gets all this stuff back, right? And I believe, if I remember right, there's a famous, I don't know if it's Livy, there's a famous saying where, Camillus says basically you can't win or you can't defeat a people or buy victory with gold. You have to earn it with iron, right? Is kind of the idea, right? The iron price, meaning you have to fight in war. So again, this is a shorter story. There's some, not tricky, but some different parts in there that might trip you up a little bit. So hopefully the grammar made some sense. The story made sense. It's not particularly long. But the more interesting part, I'd say, is really the backstory that's not being told in full here about the sack of Rome and Brennus, the famous commander Camillus. You should look all that up. Okay. But in terms of this, if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the comments below. I'm happy to help you. Otherwise, just keep practicing it, keep reading. And like I said, eventually when you read enough of these, at some point, you should feel pretty confident, right, that you can do it without needing too much help. Okay. Good luck with it.